This short video will look at the internal and external customers that are related to public services. Now, the key definitions that we're interested in are that a customer is a recipient of goods or services from a supplier. So if we think in terms of the public services generally being a supplier, the recipient of those services will be, on the whole, the general public. However, we need to bear in mind that there are internal and external customers involved in this process. An internal customer is a group or an individual that are within the same organization. So if we split a service up into a number of different areas, they will relate to one another in a customer-supplier relationship. Similarly, when we think about external customers, that tends to be a little bit more clear-cut. It's groups or individuals who are not within the same organization. So generally, the service users are the ones that we're interested in this circumstance. So here's an example. This is a police officer as an internal customer. So the police officer would be the customer of other departments within the police service. So for example, human resources. Human resources would supply a service to the police officer that they would use. Similarly, a superior officer could be considered to be the supplier of a service in order to facilitate the work of that police officer. They would get vehicles from the vehicle pool and they draw equipment from the equipment stores. So these people would expect to provide a good quality service to that police officer as the service provider. If we turn that on its head and think of a police officer as an internal supplier, well, the police officer would also supply human resources. So human resources can expect a degree of service from that police officer in their interactions. Similarly, for equipment stores, they would expect paperwork to be submitted on time and requests to be appropriate. The same would apply to the vehicle pool. And again, the superior officer could expect a certain level of service from the police officer. So in internal customer relationships, we can see that suppliers and customers can be one and the same within the same organization. If we think of external customers of the police, so people who use the police service, so for example, victims of crime are the most obvious external customer of the police. They're people who use the police services in order to help themselves. One could also consider a criminal an external customer of the police service. They have to be treated in a particular way and would expect a level of service when they're arrested. Businesses, again, are external customers, and other services. So for example, when doing joint working with the fire service or the ambulance service, they would be considered as external customers. They would make use of the police services and could expect a certain level of service. A second example then would be in the army. So an army officer would be an internal customer of things like administrative services, their superior officer, and other regiments from whom they would expect a certain level of service. They would also be a supplier, again, to their superior officer, to other regiments. They would supply information, they might supply resources. They're a supplier to those under their command, and they're also maybe a supplier to the civilian staff who require information in order to do their jobs. The external customers of the army, then, anyone who is outside of the army who requires some kind of service from them. So for example, other armed forces. Joint working is extremely common within the armed forces, so it may well be that the RAF require services from the army and therefore would expect a certain level of service. Those in need of humanitarian aid may be an external customer and again can expect a certain level of service. The security services may draw upon the experience of the army in order to do their job, and any member of the public who comes in contact with the army could be considered to be an external customer. So during the recruitment phase, for example, those attending armed forces careers offices would be considered to be external customers. Now, the ways in which these relate is a little bit more complex than that, which we'll look at in more detail in class, but this is just a general overview to get started.